And I'm just waiting for confirmation that the meeting is recording. The meeting is recording now, so with your permission, Chair, I'll take this adherent for the meeting of the Housing and Technical Resources Committee of the 30th of June. Councillor Brown?
Present.
I see that Councillor Buchanan is present. Councillor Calicis?
Here.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Campbell. Councillor Carmichael, I see that you're at the meeting. I have apologies from Councillor Chalmers. I've been advised that Councillor MacDonald is substituting for Councillor Chalmers. Can I check, Councillor MacDonald, that you're at the meeting?
Councillor MacDonald advised me that he's having connection issues at the moment, Pauline, so it may be worthwhile coming back to him at the end.
We'll come back, thank you. Councillor Convery.
Here, Pauline.
I have apologies from Councillor Cooper. I see that Councillor Corbett is here. Councillor Donnelly is here. Councillor Devlin is also here. Councillor Faulkner is here. And I see that Councillor Ferguson is here. Councillor Horsham.
I'm here, Pauline.
Thank you. I see that Councillor Fulton is here. Councillor Gray.
I'm here.
Thank you. I see that Councillor Greenshields is here. Councillor Holford.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lennon.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor McGavigan.
Here.
I see that Councillor Razak is here. Councillor Ross. Nothing from Councillor Ross. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Shearer, could I just check your attendance at the meeting this morning? Nothing from Councillor Shearer. Councillor Wark.
Here.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson is here. Just double checking the people who haven't confirmed their attendance. Councillor MacDonald. We'll check Councillor MacDonald at the end. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Ross. And there are a number of officers present at the meeting this morning. With that, I'll hand back to you for the business of the meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. We'll move on to this morning's agenda for the meeting. Agenda item 1, any declarations of interest? Are there any? If there are none, we'll move on to agenda.
Chair, yes. Sorry, it's Mark here. I'd like to declare an interest in item 5. I gave a letter of support towards that group for this project. So.
Okay, Mark. We'll ask you to leave the meeting at that item, and the clerk will invite you back in when it's concluded, if that's okay.
Yep.
We'll move on to agenda item 2, which is minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? If there are none, I'll move them as a correct record.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the monitor items. On today's agenda, agenda item 3, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2021, excluding the Housing Revenue Account, and John Kilpatrick will speak to this report. John.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the actual expenditure against the revenue budget for Housing and Technical Resources, excluding HRA, for the financial year 2021. This is the 5th and final report to committee for this year. Appendices A to D provide details of the financial position, including additional COVID-19 costs. Section 5.1 of the report notes that as at the 31st of March, there was an overspend position of 6.510 million before transfers to reserves. We are proposing transfers to reserves as detailed in Appendix B for homelessness and rapid rehousing transition plan underspends. The proposed transfers had been considered at Executive Committee on the 23rd of June and approved. This gives a final overspend of 7.084 million for the resource. This is mainly due to the additional costs and reduced income as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, including costs that were initially to be funded from capital but are now being recorded as costs within the revenue budget. These will be met from the overall Council's COVID-19 funding. Can I refer members back to section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the overspend of 7.084 million as at the 31st of March 2021 after transfers to reserves, and to approve the proposed budget variance. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2020-2021 for the Housing Revenue account. And John Kilpatrick will speak to this report again. John.
Thanks again, Chair. This report provides the actual expenditure against the revenue budget for Housing and Technical Resources HRA for the financial year 2021. This is again the 5th and final report for this year, and section 5 of the report notes that there was a break-even position against the budget after a final transfer to the balance sheet of 2.569 million. The annual budget had anticipated a transfer of 3.418 million. The lower than anticipated transfer is a combination of overspend on repairs and under recovery and rental income. These are partially offset by underspends in bad debt provision, IT payments and employee costs. And Appendix A provides further details on these variances. Can I refer members back to section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the break-even position as at the 31st of March 21 and to approve the budget variance. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, move on to agenda item 5, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2021-2022 for the Housing Revenue account, and John will speak to this report again.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the actual expenditure against the revenue budget for Housing and Technical Resources for the HRA for the period 1st of April 21 to 21st of May 21. This is the first report for the financial year 21-22, and section 5 of the report notes that there is a break-even position against the phased budget. The ongoing impact of COVID-19 on the budget continues to be monitored, including an initial reduced level of repairs at the start of the financial year, which is not expected to continue. And there's also a reduced level of rental income to the ongoing delays in the completion of the additional housing supply due to COVID-19. The HRA also continues to cover a share of the fixed costs for the property services section. Can I please refer members back to section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the break-even position as at the 21st of May 21 and to approve the budget variance. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay. Move on to agenda item 6, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2021-2022, excluding the Housing Revenue account, and John will speak to this report again.
Thanks again, Chair. This report provides information on actual expenditure against the revenue budget for Housing and Technical Resources, excluding HRA, for the period 1st of April to 21st of May 21. This is the first report for the financial year 21-22, and Appendices A to D provide details of the financial position, including the additional COVID-19 costs in Appendix D. Section 5.1 of the report notes that as at the 21st of May 21, there was an overspend against the phased budget of 70,000. This overspend is caused by additional expenditure in relation to COVID-19, including costs for temporary accommodation for homelessness. The property services section continues to incur fixed costs which require to be offset by income recovery to the value of 4.299 million as at the 21st of May 21. Can I again refer members back to section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the overspend of 0.070 million as at the 21st of May, and to approve the proposed budget variance. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 7, the capital budget monitoring report for 2020-2021, excluding the housing revenue account. And Lorraine will speak to this report.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, committee. This is the first of the 2 capital budget monitoring reports from myself this morning for the non-HRA side of the resource. This is the final for financial year 2021, and the purpose of the report is therefore to advise committee of the spend for the full year to 31st of March 21. The resources spend was included as part of the overall position that we reported to the Executive Committee last week. Section 3 of your report gives the background and explains the budget position for the year. The main point to note is the budget for the resource for financial year 2021 remains unchanged to that reported to this committee back in May. Section 5 details the financial implications. Section 5.1 notes the total programme for the year of 6.529, while Section 5.2 details the final spend for the year of 4.362 million, and that reflects the spend achieved towards or to the end of the year. That's a difference of 2.167 on the approved programme. Section 5.3 goes on to explain the final position is slightly lower than the outturn that we advised committee of back in May. The projects responsible for the original underspend that we declared in May are in section 5.3, and the projects responsible for the additional underspend as we got to the end of the financial year are noted in section 5.4 for your information. Section 5.5 notes the ongoing implications of COVID-19 on the capital programme, and also notes that any funding which we didn't utilise in 2021 will carry forward into the new year, and there's a new year programme report which I'll take you through shortly. I've got nothing further to highlight to members this morning, so if I can refer committee back to section 2 of the report and the recommendations, and ask that committee note that the housing and technical resources budget is 6.529 and that the final spend for the year is 4.362. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the capital budget monitoring report for 2020-2021 for the housing revenue account, and John will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the progress of the HRA capital programme for the financial year 2021. This is the 5th and final report for this year, and members will recall that the capital programme was revised to 48.172 million to reflect the level of deliverability that could be achieved in light of COVID-19. Appendix A of the report provides further details, including funding sources, and Section 5.2 of the report notes that the actual spend as at 31st of March 2021 was 49.362 million, a net overspend of 1.190 million. Now, this included accelerated spend on the provision of additional housing supply of 7.212 million, offset by an underspend on the housing investment projects delayed by COVID-19 of 6.022 million. In Section 5.3 of the report, we note some additional one-off income received during the year, and the net impact of these elements was an additional income of 0.798 million. Taken together, the year-end position of 1.190 million and the additional income of 0.798 million, there is a requirement to accelerate 0.392 million from future years' housing programmes into 2021. To accommodate this and to reflect the profile of the spend expected on the housing investment programme, including the continuing uncertainty surrounding the impact of lockdown, the 21-22 programme will be reduced by 6.441 million, and the 2022-23 allocation increased by 6.049 million. Can I refer members back to Section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the revised HRA capital programme of 48.172 million and expenditure to date of 49.362 million. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 9, which is the capital budget monitoring report for 2021-2022, excluding the housing revenue account, and Lorraine will speak to this report. Lorraine.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the second, excuse me, of my two reports in terms of the non-HRA capital budget for the year. And this report reflects the budget and spend to the 21st of May 2021, which is our accounting period to, excuse me. Section 3 of the report gives the background and explains how the budget has been arrived at. So it's based on the capital report that was presented to Executive Committee last week. Section 5 details the financial implications. Section 5.1 notes the resources total capital programme for the year is 8.387 million. That budget's based on the original programme of projects approved back in November 2020 for financial year 21-22, and we've updated it to include the budget carried forward from financial year 2021, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. It also includes adjustments approved by Executive Committee through the year post-November 2020, and any additional funded projects that we have for the resource. It also reflects the outcome of an exercise to identify the anticipated level of spend for the year so that we're setting a realistic programme of works for the current financial year, and that's taken into account anything that would impact on the programme, for example, any ongoing restrictions of COVID-19. In addition, as has been the case in previous years, it's been identified that to comply with accounting rules, project expenditure totalling £4 million should be reported through the revenue budget, as it cannot properly, in accounting terms, be classed as capital spend. These adjustments are for planned asset management and private sector housing scheme of assistance, and they're detailed in section 5.2. The budget of 8.387 already reflects these revenue transfers, and John has picked them up on the revenue side in his reports. Finally then, section 5.3 excuse me, notes that £210,000 has been spent to the 21st of May this year. If I can then refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 of the report, and ask that the Housing and Technical Resources budget of 8.387 and spend to the 21st of May of 210,000 be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report for 2021-2022. And John will speak to this report. John.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides information on the progress of the HRA Capital Programme for the period 1st of April 21 to 21st of May 21. This is the first report to committee for financial year 21-22, and the housing programme totals £94.360 million. Appendix A of the report provides further details, including the funding sources, and section 5.3 of the report notes that actual spend to 21st of May 21 is £7.483 million. This includes expenditure to cover the fixed overheads of the property section. I refer members back to section 2 of the report, and committee is asked to note the revised HRA capital programme of £94.360 million and expenditure to the date of £7.483 million. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Are there any questions or comments in relation to the report? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay. We'll move on to agenda item 11, which is the Workforce Monitoring Report for March and April 2021. And Elaine will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, this is a standard workforce monitoring report, and that provides committee with an update on the employment information for the period March to April of this year. Paragraph 4.1 shows that the resource absence figure for April was 3.3%, which represented a decrease of 0.3% when compared to the month before. Looking at April 2020, the figure has decreased by 0.5%, and the April 2021 figure is 1% lower than the council-wide figure. Looking at the absence figures at April and the annual trend, the projected annual average for the resource for 2021-22 is 3.3%, again compared to the council-wide average of 4.3%. You will see that the absence information contained within the report also includes absences as a result of COVID-19, and at the time of the report being produced, the Council's absence levels were 4.9%, with 0.4 of that relating to COVID absences for both sickness and special leave. As an update, I am looking at the figures for last week. That figure remained at 4.9%, with 0.7 being related to COVID absences and special leave. Moving on to the occupational health information, which is detailed in Appendix 2, it shows that there were 87 occupational health referrals made during the period, which was an increase of 18 when compared to the same period last year. But obviously that period last year was when we were in lockdown, so a lot of activity ceased, so I would expect to see an increase there. Again, looking at 4.3 for the accident incidents, there is an increase of 4 when compared to last year, with 5 being recorded, and again for the same reason. Obviously we went into lockdown last year, so again we will see some figures increasing in comparison to these periods last year. Moving on to the employee relations activity at 4.4, there was one disciplinary hearing during the period and no other employee relations activity during that time. 4.5 shows the analysis of leavers, again as detailed in Appendix 2, and there were 5 leavers during the period eligible for an exit interview, with 2 being conducted. 4.7 shows that 10 employees left employment in total, and managers have indicated that all these posts have been replaced. And therefore I would refer members back to Section 2 within the report and ask committee to approve the recommendation to note the employment information for March and April 2021. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Elaine. And I see Councillor Brown has his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick thought. I mean, I appreciate this is a snapshot on the medical stuff at page 53 in terms of physiotherapy and all that between March, April last year and March, April this year. Nevertheless, the increase in physiotherapy and counselling and so forth is quite significant on that month snapshot. Is there a general trend, or has that just remained pretty static? I'd just be interested to know if there's any sort of other background to that. Thank you.
Would you respond?
Yeah, Councillor Brown, we are seeing obviously an increase, and I think it does reflect on the time period, looking at last March and April, when a number of it, at the point when we went into lockdown, and a number of appointments were all cancelled. So I think we are seeing an increase in that. I would expect to be similar when we look at the next couple of months, just because of the activity that stopped at that period. Obviously, we were trying to do telephone consultations during the time as well, but with employees perhaps not requiring to be physically at work, the numbers of these certainly reduced last year. So I would expect to see an increase across all of the resources, not just housing and technical resources.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thanks. We'll move on to items for decision. Agenda item 12, which is the annual review of South Lanarkshire's Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, and Annette will speak to this report. Annette.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to update committee on the completion of the second annual review of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan. South Lanarkshire's Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan was developed in collaboration with a range of partners and stakeholders and approved by Housing and Technical Resources Committee back in January 2019. The first annual review was reported to and approved by committee in September 2020 and then submitted to the Scottish Government. To date, to support the implementation of the plan, South Lanarkshire Council has been awarded over £1.7 million from the Scottish Government's Ending Homelessness Together Fund. The plan and the resource allocation is coordinated and monitored by a multi-agency homelessness strategy group. The second review of progress of the plan was carried out alongside the ongoing monitoring of the impact of COVID-19 on demand for homelessness services, and while also the service is trying to identify future potential pressures. During 2021, and despite the challenges of the pandemic, positive progress was made with the majority of actions in year 2. As noted at 4.2 in the report, 96% of the indicators were on target or slightly behind. 4 actions were completed, and only 1 measure was classed as red, being behind target. The Council and its partners have made excellent progress towards delivering on the agreed Rapid Rehousing Plan priorities for year 2. And a summary of the key highlights and achievements are noted in the table at 4.6 of the report and include the delivery of 339 additional social rented homes, including those purchased through the Council's open market purchase scheme, the financial assistance and support that was provided to help prevent homelessness and to sustain tenancies both in the social rented and private sectors, an 8% reduction in the number of households with children in temporary accommodation, a 41% reduction in long-term homelessness, a reduction in repeat homelessness, and we saw 27 households have their temporary tenancy converted to a secure tenancy. We saw an increase in the percentage of lets to those on the urgent housing list during the year. We continued to provide the Home Start service with start-up support for new tenants who had been homeless. We saw an expansion of the Housing First programme, and we also saw the ongoing integration and joint working with partners, including health and social care. Following review of all the actions and measures within the plan, a number of changes are proposed, and these are highlighted at section 5 of the report. It's proposed that the 4 completed actions be replaced, that the wording of 3 actions be revised, and that 1 new action focusing on the development of our approaches to support victims of domestic abuse be added. Section 6 of the report summarises the impact of COVID-19 on the homelessness service, including the increased demand on services. An increase in homeless presentations was experienced in the year, from 2,090 to 2,225 in 2021. As reflected nationally, we also saw significant pressure on our temporary accommodation, with demand increasing by 28% at the same time that supply was significantly disrupted. Actions were taken by the service to ensure that the homelessness service continued to be provided during the year. Despite the long-term commitment, though, to reduce the volume of temporary accommodation overall, the portfolio of temporary accommodation was increased through our joint working with partners, including housing associations, but also with the University of the West of Scotland, where an innovative arrangement for the use of vacant student accommodation was achieved. We recognise that in the year ahead, the service and the plan will require to be flexible and adapt to the uncertainty and pressures placed, including an anticipated increase in homelessness. As noted in section 7 of the report, a number of linked national and local policy changes have also been made in the last year. These include further recommendations from the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group, known as HRSAG, the extension of the Unsuitable Accommodation Order, the development of our own temporary accommodation strategic plan, the development of a housing pathway specific for victims of domestic abuse, and the further development of arrangements to support care-experienced young people. The priorities for 21-22 will see a focus still on delivering core and essential services and meeting need, but also a commitment to delivering on the rapid rehousing priorities. Priorities for year 3 will build upon the progress we've made and the learning from years 1 and 2, and at section 8.5 of the report, the key priorities are listed. I take you to the section regarding the financial position, and as noted in section 11, to support the delivery of the plan in year 3, the Council has been awarded a further £440,000. Committee is then asked to approve that the progress made in delivering the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan objectives, as noted out in the annual review, and attached to Appendix 1 be noted, that the proposed revisions detailed in section 5 be approved, and that the key priorities for 21-22 as detailed in section 8, not 7 as it says in your papers, be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annette. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I mean, there's a lot of good work involved in all of this, but I wanted to ask in a general sort of way, part of the issue on this as long-term has been, if you like, repeat homelessness, people whose tenancies fail for whatever reason and things of that kind. And I just wondered if we had any particular pressure points in that beyond the normal. I mean, was it people with care experience? Was it domestic breakups? Was it people with drug and alcohol addiction issues? Are there any trends in there that we should know about? that help us to prioritise the work that we're doing in this particular area.
Thank you, Councillor. We actually saw repeat homelessness go down in the last 12 months, and we're actually, our performance was better than the national average. So it is an area that we're seeing improvement upon. We also saw tenancy sustainment improve in the year. So I think we're on definitely a journey in terms of reducing repeat homelessness through some of the prevention activity that happens. There's not one reason why people represent as homeless. It could be that they've been through the criminal justice process and or their own tenancy failed. So the efforts that we're putting in around housing support are really, the learning is that that's the real difference that we make. So some of the intensive wraparound support that we're doing for Housing First, and some of the joint working we're doing with criminal justice around people leaving the criminal justice service. So there are areas that we can see we can make further improvements upon, and we're focusing on working with partners to do that by providing additional support.
Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Donnelly, Chair.
Apologies, Councillor Donnelly.
Councillor Donnelly's hand is now going down, Chair.
No, I'm coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I'm having technical difficulties. Just to welcome the report. I think it's a very, very good report in the work that South Lanarkshire staff are doing and the department's doing. And I wish them well moving on to their next stages and continue that good work, particularly in view of we've went through COVID. We've had a lot of people fleeing domestic abuse, and that number's very, very well shown in all documents. So that we're highlighting, we're adding domestic abuse to our list is to be commended as well, and thanks for that. And again, thanks for this very, very detailed report.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any further questions or comments? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Move on to the next item on the agenda item 13, which is in relation to the sale of properties to West Whittleburn Housing Co-op. And Frank will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the Council to enter into a contract to sell 60 properties to West Whittleburn Housing Cooperative Limited as part of the Council's Whittleburn Regeneration Project. If I can take you to Section 3, that sets out the background in that the Whittleburn Regeneration Project was approved by this committee in October 2016, and discussions have been ongoing since the approval with West Whittleburn Housing Cooperative to ascertain if they could actively participate within the project. This led to the co-op making a grant application to the Scottish Government, which was approved in March 2021. Section 4 sets out the principal conditions, the main ones being that the Council will receive a payment of £9,679,811, which is exclusive of VAT, for the 60 properties, and that the properties will be sold on a turnkey basis. That is, the Council will receive full payment upon completion of the properties, and that will be in a phased basis. Section 5 notes that there are no employee implications, and Section 6 confirms that the proposals have been included within the budgets approved for the Whittleburn Regeneration Project, which is included within the approved Housing Capital Programme. Section 7 confirms that there are no climate change, sustainability and environmental implications, and Section 8 states that if the proposal did not proceed, there will be a risk to the delivery of the Whittleburn Regeneration Project as it's currently approved, and that the Council would therefore require to reassess delivery options. Section 9 confirms that the current proposals have received all of the necessary statutory consents, and as the report does not introduce a new policy, function or strategy or recommendation to change an existing policy, function or strategy, no impact assessment is required. I therefore refer committee back to Section 2 of the report and ask that the recommendations contained within are approved. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Frank. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 14, which is in relation to the proposed lease of ground at Old Mill Road car park, and it's Joanne that will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to recommend a lease of ground and servitude at Old Mill Road car park in East Kilbride for the siting of an electrical substation in support of electric vehicle charging points. Transport Scotland Local Authority Installation Fund are funding a project to increase access to electric vehicle charging points throughout South Lanarkshire. Roads and Transportation have awarded the contract for the new infrastructure, and the specific proposals for Old Mill Road, East Kilbride, require a new substation. As this will exclusively serve the vehicle charging points, it's not proposed to charge a rental. I would therefore recommend committee that section 2 of the report of the lease and the servitude be granted in terms of the conditions in section 4 of the report.
Thank you, Joanne. Are there any questions or comments? There are none. I'll move the recommendations.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, agenda item 15, which is in relation to an asset transfer to Douglasdale Real Group. And Joanne will speak to this report again.
I'm just going to leave, Chair.
No problem. Thank you, Mark. Well, I'll ask the clerk to invite you back in once we've concluded.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to recommend a community asset transfer of Douglas West Woodland to Douglas Real Group. Apologies, but paragraph 1 in the report refers to the transfer being by lease. However, the proposal is for sale, and that is referenced throughout the rest of the report. Pauline, could you possibly share the draft plan, please? Douglas Real have applied for asset transfer on the 15th of March 2021, and following public consultation there were 2 representations received. Both were in favour of the asset transfer, however questioned the exact title boundaries. So what you will see in this plan is the draft proposals and of the land that's to go. However, it should be noted that the area of land shaded blue to the south of the road is not included in the transaction. Legal Services are currently preparing a full title report and plan. The Asset Transfer Assessment Panel met on the 18th of May and considered the asset transfer implications in terms of the property, the organisation and the project as set out in section 3 of the report. Douglas Real Group proposals meet the requirements of the Community Empowerment Act. The organisation is considered to have a stable membership with growing capacity, and their constitution contains an asset lock, meaning that if the organisation were to fold, the asset would have to be transferred to another organisation of a similar nature. The phased development of the community woodland, starting with improvements to the infrastructure, such as the drainage and footpaths, and aspiring to link in with the national walking and cycle routes, provides cultural, environmental and recreation community benefits, along with an immediate employment opportunity. This is not a commercial woodland, but an informal recreational area. The land has been valued at £76,000 and the group have requested a discount of 30% to reflect these community benefits. Douglas Real have already secured funding from SSE Sustainable Development Fund for the acquisition and for the employment of a development officer. I would therefore refer the committee to section 2 of the report and recommend the asset transfer by sale on the terms and conditions in section 5 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
No.
Can I ask members to put themselves on mute if they're not speaking?
Yes.
Perhaps the clerk could help us out here. By muting Eileen, I think.
No, just a way to mute myself. I'm actually at a meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. If there aren't any questions or comments, I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 16, and it's in relation to the property compliance officers. And Frank will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to changes to the structure of the General Services Property Maintenance sections to reflect the service delivery model required to meet future demands. Section 3 outlines the background of the report, outlining that the proposals will harmonise the roles of the property technical assistants and compliance officers and create compliance officer posts able to provide additional support relative to external fabric and internal finishes. Section 4 details the proposals and confirms that to take forward the service improvement, it is proposed that the remit of the current team of compliance officers be expanded to include building structure, fabric and internal finishes, and that to fully implement this model, the existing 6 full-time equivalent property technical assistant posts will require to be removed and replaced instead by a further 6 full-time equivalent compliance officer posts. Section 5 sets out the employee implications, confirming that the current property technical assistants will be matched into the new compliance officer posts, which have been evaluated through the Council's job evaluation scheme. This will include transferring to the same terms and conditions of the existing compliance officers, and that there has been positive consultation with both the employee group and the trades union, who are supportive of this change. Section 6 notes that the financial implications, and there's a small, it's just over £3,000. There's a small error in that in terms of the 3,200. If I can refer you back to Section 5, the correct financial implications are in there, and it's the broad range of just up to over £3,100. As there are no significant issues in the remaining sections, I'd refer committee to Section 2 of the report and ask that the recommendations within are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Frank. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. And as the next 2 items on the agenda are for noting, I'd propose that we...
Chair, could you just let me invite Councillor Horsham back in?
Apologies, Pauline, of course.
Thank you, no problem.
I'm back, Pauline.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. So, as the next 2 items on the agenda are for noting, I'd propose that we agree both of their recommendations. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed. There's no urgent business, so I would like to thank you all for